Alright, so it's time for a quick exercise. This one's going to cover the different DOM selectors that we just discussed. So the way that it works, giving you some HTML, simple HTML in H1, 4 paragraphs, some have IDs, some have classes, some have nothing. And what I want you to do is come up with 4 different ways to select the first paragraph. So at least 4, there's more than that. Using the different methods that we talked about, document.getElementById, by class name, by tag name, query selector all, mix and match those, and come up with 4 different ways to select this. If you'd like, you can download the code, I've attached it. Otherwise, go ahead and just type this up yourself. Come up with 4 examples, pause the video, and I'll be back in just a few seconds. Okay, so let's talk about how we could solve this. I have the HTML file here. We've got an H1, and here's the paragraph that we're after, the first paragraph. It has ID equal to first, class is special, and then there's some other paragraphs that we don't really care about. So to select it, we have a few different options. Let's start with getElementById. So we'll just do document.getElementById first. We could also select based off of the ID first using query selector. So document.querySelector, and we can't just say first, we also need the CSS selector syntax, which means adding that octothorpe, which tells query selector that this is an ID called first, and we get the same thing. So we could also select based off of the class, which is special. So we could do document.getElements by class name, and the class name is special. And that's going to give us 2 elements that have that class name. So to narrow it down to just the first one, we would add on 0 afterwards. Square bracket 0, and that gives us the first paragraph. We could also use query selector, and we use the dot syntax because it's a class. And this time we don't need the square bracket 0 because regular old query selector only gives us the first result. If we used query selector all, we could add 0 afterwards, and it would work the same way. We get the same first paragraph. The other option we have is to select based off of the tag name, which is paragraph or P. So we can do document.getElements by tag name, pass in P, and that gives us all paragraphs. So we would do bracket 0. We could also use query selector, so document.querySelector, and we don't need to change what's inside the parentheses because in CSS, this is how you select a paragraph tag. So query selector will give us the first one, as you can see here, or we could also do query selector all and add in 0. We could also make life harder on ourselves and use some more creative CSS selectors. For instance, I know that this paragraph, the first one, is the first paragraph directly after an H1. They're adjacent. So I could write a CSS selector that says select the paragraphs after an H1 or adjacent to an H1 with the plus sign. So that would look like this if I really wanted to do it. Query selector, and that would be H1 plus paragraph. And that also gives me the first paragraph. There are plenty of other ways that we could do it as well. We could do first of type paragraph. We can get pretty creative, but there's no reason to do that if we can just get it with an ID or a class name or a tag name. Okay, so hopefully you were able to come up with at least 4 of those. As you can see, there's a lot of options. Just like in CSS, we can target something in so many different ways. There's not really one right answer. In this case, because it has an ID, I would probably just use query selector with the ID, which is what we did up here, or getElementById.